test is in 4 parts. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now look at Part 1.
Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a customer and an overseas shipping agent. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 8. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 8.
Good afternoon, Denham Shipping. How can I be of service?
Well, I wish to inquire about sending a container of personal items from the UK to Ireland.
No problem. Would you like me to give you an estimate of the cost?
Yes, please.
Well, first of all, may I take your details?
Of course. My name's Tim Lafferty.
Could you spell your surname for me, please, Tim?
Yes, it's Lafferty. Lafferty.
Thank you, Tim. Now, where would you like us to pick your container up from?
My university, if possible.
OK. Let me make a note of the address.
It's Abbeyfield University.
Is that Abbeyfield?
That's right. Park Street, Brighton.
Perfect. And may I take down your postcode too?
It's BR8 9P3.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Have you the container's measurements?
I do. It's approximately 2.5 metres long by 1.25 metres wide.
I see. Quite a big one then.
Indeed.
And the height?
I make it 1 metre and 20 centimetres deep.
So that's 2.5 by 1.25 by 1.2.
Right.
And what will actually be in the box, Tim?
Oh, mostly old uni books.
OK.
And some music albums.
Anything else?
Yes, a little bit of stationery.
I see. And could you put an estimate on the value of the items?
The books are quite valuable. They're worth around £1,800. The music albums, maybe half that, say £900. And you can put the stationery down as £300.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 9 and 10. Now listen and answer questions 9 and 10.
OK. And will you be purchasing contents cover from us also?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Sorry, let me explain. Because your items are worth more than £2,000, we recommend that you purchase insurance to cover yourself in the event of damage or loss.
Makes sense. What are my options?
Well, we offer 3 insurance deals: the premium rate, standard rate, and economy rate ones. Premium offers full cover in the event of loss, damage, or theft, which means you would be provided with the full cost of replacing your belongings.
What about standard and economy?
Standard will give you today's value, the second-hand value of your belongings, and economy provides you with a fixed payment of £1,000 in the event of loss, damage or theft.
Well, I can afford to live without those books, to be honest. So just give me the cheapest option.
We recommend standard cover for all our customers.
No, thank you. That won't be necessary. The cheapest option will be fine.
No problem. And one last thing, will you be needing delivery at your office, at your house, or do you intend to pick up your container at the port?
Home delivery would suit me best, I think.
We'll get that process for you.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a discussion between 3 people in a university tutorial. In the first part of the discussion, they're talking about city traffic and the motor car.
First, look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully.
We're very pleased to welcome Professor Isaac Nebworth to our tutorial group today. And he's come to share one of his pet passions with us, city traffic and our Western dependence on the motor car. I believe questions are quite welcome throughout.
Thank you. Well, I know you're all very familiar with the superhighway here in Melbourne. But do superhighways automatically lead to super wealth, as our politicians would have us believe? I think not.
Can you give us an example of what you mean exactly?
Sure. Well, by continuing to encourage this dependence on the motor car, we simply create more congestion and more urban sprawl. And you can see that here in Melbourne, right under your nose.
Excuse me, I would just like to say that I feel the sprawl is part of the city. The freeways mean people can enjoy the benefits of living away from the centre on larger blocks with gardens, but still be able to drive back into the city centre for work or entertainment.
Well, I'm not convinced that people want to do that. And is our money being well spent? It may be okay for you now, but come back to me in 5 years' time. Let's take CityLink, for example, the new freeway here in Melbourne.
Well, I use the freeway all the time. I think it's great.
Ah, yes, but it cost $2 billion to build, and you could have gotten 10 times the value by putting the money into public transport. If you give the automobile road space, it will fill that space, and you'll soon find you'll be crawling along your CityLink.
But surely you cannot simply blame the car. Some of the blame must rest with governments and city planners.
Well, there is an argument, surely, that building good roads is actually beneficial because most new cars these days are highly efficient. They use far less petrol than in the past, and emissions of dangerous gases are low. Old, congested roads, on the other hand, encourage traffic to move slowly, and it's the stationary cars that cause the pollution and smog, whereas good roads increase traffic speeds and thus the amount of time cars are actually on the roads.
Well, this is the old argument put forward by the road lobby, but for me it's clear-cut. Roads equal cars, which equals smog. Public transport is the way to go.
In the second part of the discussion, the professor talks about public transport in different cities.
Before the broadcast continues, look at questions 15 to 20. You will now listen to the second part of the talk.
Now, on that topic of public transport, I read somewhere recently that Australia isn't doing too badly in the challenge to increase the use of public transport.
Better than America, granted. But by comparison with Canada, it's not so good. For instance, if you compare Toronto with the U.S. metropolis of Detroit, only 160 kilometers away, in Detroit, only 1% of passenger travel is by public transport, whereas in Toronto it's 24%, which is considerably better than Sydney, which can only boast 16%.
Well, I think it's encouraging that our least car-dependent city is actually our largest city. 16% of trips being taken on public transport in Sydney isn't too bad.
But it's a long way behind Europe. Take both London and Paris, for instance, where 30% of all trips taken are on public transport.
Well, they do both have an excellent underground system.
And Frankfurt comes in higher still at 32%.
I understand that they've been very successful in Copenhagen at ridding the city of the car. Can you tell us anything about that experiment?
Yes, indeed. Copenhagen is a wonderful example of a city that has learned to live without the motor car. Back in the 1960s, they adopted a number of policies designed to draw people back into the city. For instance, they paid musicians and artists to perform in the streets. They also built cycle lanes, and now 30% of the inhabitants of Copenhagen use a bicycle to go to work. Sydney, by comparison, can only boast 1% of the population cycling to work.
It could have something to do with all the hills.
Then they banned cars from many parts of the city, and every year 3% of the city parking is removed. And by constantly reducing parking, they've created public spaces and clean air.
Really?
There are also freely available bicycles, which you can hire for practically nothing. And, of course, they have an excellent public transport system.
Well, that's all very well for Copenhagen, but I'd just like to say that some cities are just too large for a decent public transport system to work well, particularly in areas with low population. Because if there aren't many people using the service, then they don't schedule enough buses or trains for that route.
I accept that there's a vicious circle here, but people do need to support the system.
And secondly, the whole process takes so long because usually you have to change. You know, from bus to train, that sort of thing. And that can be quite difficult. Ultimately, it's much easier to jump in your car, and often it turns out to be cheaper.
Sure, but cheaper for whom? You or society? We have to work towards the ideal, and not give in all the time because things are too difficult. Anyway, let's move on to some of the results of the survey, which I think you'll agree.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to part 3.
Part 3. You will hear a discussion between students Maria and Jack. In the first part of the discussion, they're talking about their opinions about some of the things in their universities.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Two four one 4331.
Good afternoon. May I speak to Jack Robert, please?
Speaking, please.
Hi, Jack. This is Maria.
Hello, Maria. How are you getting on there?
Fine. I arrived in Nottingham yesterday. I've just settled down, and I live on the campus of Nottingham University.
Oh, that's good. Do you like the campus?
Yes, it's beautiful. What do you think of yours?
Edinburgh University? It's marvellous. It's on a hill and very close to the sea. I like it very much.
It sounds beautiful. Jack, what's the weather like there?
Oh, it's fine and sunny. It's said that the weather here is very nice in summer, but awful in winter. What's the weather like in Nottingham?
Well, it's a bit depressing. It's been raining since yesterday. I can't go out, so I have to stay in my room.
What about your room? Is it a nice one?
Yes, it's small and elegant. How about yours?
Mine is an ordinary one. It's a twin study room. I share it with one of my classmates. He's intelligent and very friendly. We're getting on quite well. How's your roommate?
She's very nice, but a little bit quiet. She likes reading and seldom speaks. By the way, do you like the Scottish food there?
Oh, I like it. It's very delicious.
Oh, really? I don't like the food here. It's disgusting. It has no taste. I have to cook for myself in my room.
Well, Maria, as the saying goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Come on, don't be too choosy. Oh, someone's at the door. I have to answer it, Maria. I'll call you this evening. Bye.
Bye. Ellen, a student union officer, is conducting a survey about the university facilities. She is asking 2 students about their opinions.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
I'm Alan, and I work for the Student Union. Now, I'd like to hear your opinions about a few things in the university. We've asked for some volunteers to help us conduct this survey into how satisfied students are with the university facilities. First of all, let's take the lecture rooms. We could score them, for instance, 1 is excellent, 2 satisfactory, 3 rather poor, and 4 really bad. Robert, you first, please. What do you think about the lecture rooms here?
Not so good, I'm afraid. I would score 3. They're too small for one thing. Sometimes we can hardly find a seat.
Yes, but that doesn't happen very often. Personally, I think they're all right. They're comfortable, and the acoustics are quite reasonable. It doesn't matter where you sit, you can always hear the lecture. I would give 2 for them.
How do you feel about the car parking facilities? Are they adequate?
You must be joking. I can never find a car parking space when I need one, and when I finally do, it's a very long walk to the university's teaching building. I'd give it a 4.
I'm afraid I also agree. We need more car parks urgently. This is perhaps one of the major shortcomings of this campus. It gets a 4 from me as well. I come to the university 20 minutes early, just so I can drive around looking for a parking space.
What about the computer center then?
I think it's first class. The software base contains a large selection of learning programs, language games, and word processing facilities. I would give a score of 1.
I quite agree with you. It's very modern, and also under the supervision of qualified staff who can offer help to us while we work, should we need them.
Oh, good. Well, what do you think of the library facilities? Let's say the periodical room first.
Well, I've scored that 3. I'm sorry to have to say, but I think the room has poor lighting, and I'm disappointed about that.
I've given it a score of 1. As far as I'm concerned, it's excellent and well stocked.
Thank you, Robert and Mary. Now, let's turn to the photocopying facilities.
I would give it a score of 2. Personally, I think it's all right and it's very helpful.
Huh? I would score 3. I think it's too expensive for photocopying, and there are not enough machines. Sometimes we have to stand in a line.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the...
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a talk on local businesses at a university business centre. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
The subject of this evening's talk at the North Bank Business Centre is local businesses in the area surrounding the university and the benefit they bring to the employment prospects of people in the local area, especially young people at the beginning of their career. We established the centre in response to approaches from several business people in the area who had wanted to start up new businesses, but who had not managed to find any help locally and did not know where to turn. Moreover, they had all, without exception, come up against enormous bureaucratic obstacles. We therefore invited them in as a group to meet the members of the department and the students. Stemming from that is the centre, which now focuses mainly, but not exclusively, on business startups. Just after the centre was set up, snapshot research conducted by the department over the telephone gave some startling results. The information about local businesses revealed that 3 out of every 10 local business startups that we could collect information on had failed within the first 6 months, and another 5 had gone within the year, leaving only 2. The most common reasons given for the business's closing were, first, high rents, which are 33% higher than the national average due to the area being very central. Second, lack of knowledge about grants, basically because of ignorance about how to access them. And thirdly, a lack of business support because they did not know where to obtain advice from. Since the centre came into existence 3 years ago, we have helped change this climate of failure. The current statistics show a remarkable turnaround in the fortunes of local businesses. And now, after a year, only 2 businesses close out of every 10, compared to 8 before the centre was set up. Six local businesses are now taking part in a work placement and monitoring scheme, which is of mutual benefit to ourselves and the companies involved. O Foods, a small start-up company with 9 employees involved in organic food and based at a local market, has 1 final year graduate doing a year-long study on improving the stock turnaround. This was a particular problem because the company found that they were losing sometimes up to 30% of their stock. Another start-up is Innovations, which deals with producing video games. This company, which employs only 5 people, all under the age of 25, is receiving support in attracting business partners and achieving production targets. In the smaller business category, Sampson's Limited, a courier company which is interested in developing a taxi service, is being offered help with their business expansion plans. Another small niche company called Vintage Scooter, which specialises in revamping old scooters, is taking part in a product monitoring scheme, offering customer service up to a year after purchase to check the quality of their restoration. The first of the 2 medium-sized companies that the scheme is monitoring is Build Limited, which employs 47 people. A comparison of their products and services with other businesses in the area is being carried out by a researcher who is trying to support them in their efforts to extend the company's product range. The last company, Jones Systems, is perhaps the most interesting because it has been the victim of considerable personnel problems, which have been affecting the day-to-day operations of the company. And so, we are looking at conflict management and team building within the company. To sum up, advisors help the companies look at different business options and models, apply for grants, deal with employment issues, systems creation, and also provide accommodation at the centre to help them start up. E-mentoring for fledgling businesses is also in operation for those who find it difficult to attend the centre personally. The programme is funded by grants from local authorities.
That is the end of Part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.